The kingdom of Eldrath had always been a place of order and strength, ruled by the Alpha King, a man whose power was unmatched and whose gaze could silence even the loudest hall. Soldiers and nobles alike revered him, yet few dared to approach him closely, for his temper was as fierce as his sword. Loyalty in Eldrath was measured by courage, by the ability to follow orders without hesitation, and by the unspoken fear of crossing the Alpha King. Yet, on the morning that the Omega arrived, even the mightiest walls of the palace seemed to tremble. She came not with fanfare or banners, but simply as if she had always belonged. Her hair was the color of ash kissed by the first light of dawn. Her eyes deep pools that seemed to see both the surface and the soul beneath. She walked with a quiet strength, not demanding attention, but commanding it nonetheless. The first to notice her were the Pups, young warriors chosen by the Alpha King for their loyalty and vigor. They had been trained to obey, to fear nothing, and to place the kingdom above all else. Yet, when the Omega entered the courtyard, their hearts did something they had never known. They stirred, eager and unsettled, as though invisible strings pulled them toward her. The Alpha King, observing from the balcony of his throne room, frowned. It was not unusual for the young warriors to admire beauty or grace, but this was different. Their eyes did not merely follow her, they sought her. With a loyalty that felt alive, almost instinctual. He tightened his grip on the railing, a storm of curiosity and caution brewing inside him. He descended to the courtyard, his boots clicking on the cold stones. The Omega turned at the sound, and for the briefest moment, their eyes met. There was no fear in her gaze, only calm awareness. She did not bow, nor did she shrink. She simply acknowledged him with a tilt of her head, a subtle gesture that carried more meaning than words could ever convey. "Who are you?" the Alpha King demanded, his voice carrying the weight of command. "And why do the Pups follow you, as if you are their queen?" The Omega's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "They have always known where they belong," she said softly. "And perhaps, one day, you will too." He felt a flicker of unease. Her words were not arrogance, nor were they challenge, they were truth spoken in a voice so gentle that it cut deeper than any sword. He studied her, searching for some sign of trickery or weakness. Yet there was none. She was real, and in that moment, he realized that she was unlike anyone he had ever met. The Pups, ignoring his presence, approached her with a mix of reverence and excitement. They spoke quietly, words meant for her ears alone, and she listened with patience and understanding, as if each one of them carried a story she already knew. The Alpha King watched, perplexed and uneasy. This woman had not raised a hand, had not given a command, yet the loyalty she inspired was stronger than any oath he had ever heard in his halls. Later that evening, the Alpha King summoned her to the throne room. Candles flickered along the tall walls, casting dancing shadows that made the room feel alive. He seated himself upon the throne, the weight of his authority pressing down on her, and studied her as one might study a dangerous animal. Curious, cautious, yet wary of provocation. "You have disrupted the order of my kingdom," he said, his voice low and commanding. "The Pups should follow my will, not yours. How is it that they obey you above all else?" The Omega stepped forward, her movements deliberate and calm. "I ask nothing of them," she replied. "I do not command, nor do I demand. Their loyalty is theirs to give. I simply see them as they are." The Alpha King's brow furrowed. He had never encountered someone who could move his warriors' hearts without force, without fear, without the threat of punishment. He felt a strange stirring in his chest, a feeling he could not name, a mix of curiosity and longing that both unsettled and fascinated him. Over the following days, the Omega moved through the kingdom with quiet grace. She spoke with the elders, tended to the sick, and wandered the gardens where moonlight pooled like silver water. Everywhere she went, the Pups followed. Not because they were commanded, not because they feared punishment, but because something within them recognized her. Something deep, older than the mountains, called them to her. The Alpha King tried to maintain his distance, observing from balconies, watching her in secret as though studying a rare creature. But the more he observed, the more he felt the pull himself, a connection he could not explain. A thread that seemed to reach into the depths of his soul. One night, as he walked the palace gardens alone, he found her sitting beneath a large, twisted tree, its branches like black veins against the starry sky. She looked up as he approached, her eyes reflecting the pale light of the moon. "You watch too much," she said, her voice gentle but carrying a quiet authority. "Curiosity is natural, but caution serves you better." "I need to know," he replied. "Why even my strongest warriors, my closest companions, follow you so willingly. This should not happen." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the depth of his soul. "They follow not because of strength, nor because of fear. They follow because they recognize what is true. And perhaps you will recognize it too." He felt a pang of something unfamiliar, a vulnerability that he had never allowed himself to acknowledge. His hands clenched into fists. Yet he could not look away. She had a power over him that was not physical, not rooted in force, but in understanding and presence. Days passed, and tension in the kingdom grew. The nobles whispered about the Omega, about her strange influence over the pups, about the quiet power she carried. Some feared her, others admired her. But none could deny that the Alpha King himself seemed changed. The Alpha King, for the first time in his life, felt a need beyond command. He needed to understand her, to see the truth of her being, and in seeking it, he found himself drawn into a world he had never known. A world where loyalty came not from fear, where strength could be gentle, and where even the heart of an Alpha King could be swayed. Late one evening, a cry echoed through the palace. The youngest pup had fallen ill, his body trembling with a strange fever that no healer could cure. The Omega rushed to his side, kneeling beside him and whispering words no one else could hear. The Alpha King arrived moments later. Witnessing her gentle touch and the way the pup's eyes slowly brightened, a warmth returning to his small face. For the first time, the Alpha King realized that her power was not in dominance, nor in magic that could be seen or measured. It was in the quiet connection of souls, the ability to awaken what was hidden, to inspire courage and trust, to bring life and loyalty without command. He stepped closer, his voice low, almost reverent. "Who are you, truly?" The Omega looked at him with calm certainty. "I am who they needed, and perhaps who you will need as well. Time will tell." In that moment, the Alpha King understood that the kingdom, his warriors, and even himself had been unprepared for someone like her. She had come not to challenge his throne, but to awaken hearts, to test the strength of loyalty, and to reveal the truths that had long been buried beneath power and fear. And in the quiet of the palace night, the Alpha King felt a flicker of both awe and unease. For the first time, he understood that even kings are not immune to the pull of a soul that truly belongs to them. Cliffhanger. The Omega stood in the moonlit courtyard, her eyes glimmering with unseen knowledge. The pups gathered silently around her, their devotion unshakable. The Alpha King, heart-pounding, realized that he would have to face not just her power but the truth of his own heart. And he did not yet know whether he was ready for what that truth might demand. The days after the Omega's arrival were unlike any the kingdom of Eldrath had ever known. The pups moved through the halls with a light in their eyes, their devotion no longer just duty. It was awe, reverence, and a kind of fierce loyalty that could not be commanded. The Alpha King watched them closely, a storm of curiosity and unease brewing in his chest. He was a man of strength, of control, yet he felt powerless in ways he had never imagined. Each morning, he found himself observing the Omega from the high windows of his chambers. She walked among the pups in the courtyard, not giving orders, but seeming to understand each one's heart. When a young warrior faltered, unsure of his own skill or courage, she would place a gentle hand on his shoulder and whisper something that made his fear vanish. When one of the pups laughed, she smiled softly, as if their joy was a song only she could hear. The Alpha King, who had always relied on fear and command, felt a stirring of unfamiliar longing. He had never thought that strength could exist in gentleness, nor that a ruler could be moved not by conquest but by trust. And yet, with every glance, every soft word, the Omega challenged everything he had known about loyalty, power, and the heart itself. One evening, under the silver glow of a full moon, he found her in the palace gardens. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming flowers, and the leaves whispered in the wind. The Omega was sitting on a low stone bench, her hands folded in her lap, eyes closed as if listening to a melody only she could hear. "You move through this kingdom as though it belongs to you," the Alpha King said, stepping closer. His voice carried the weight of authority, but there was an edge of curiosity beneath it. "And yet, you ask nothing. You take nothing. How is it that you command such loyalty?" The Omega opened her eyes slowly, and he was caught in their depth. "I do not command," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "They choose me, and they choose themselves. Power is not always taken with force. Sometimes it is given, willingly and freely." He frowned, trying to understand. "And what of me?" he asked, almost without realizing. "Do you expect that I, too, should choose you?" The Omega tilted her head, her gaze steady. "I do not ask. But even a king cannot escape the truth of his own heart. Time will tell if you are ready to see it." The Alpha King felt a shiver run down his spine. There was a strange tension between them, an unspoken pull that neither fear nor desire could fully explain. It was a dance, a silent challenge of wills, hearts, and unspoken truths. He wanted to draw closer, to understand her. But he also feared what he might find in the depths of his own longing. Over the next few days, the Alpha King attempted to reassert control. He trained the pups himself, tested their loyalty, and reminded them of the laws of the kingdom. Yet, no matter what he did, they remained drawn to the Omega. They laughed at her jokes, hung on her words, and followed her silently into the gardens and the forest paths. One young pup, named Kael, stumbled during sword practice. The Alpha King's voice rose sharply, demanding discipline. But before he could strike out, the Omega stepped forward. She placed a gentle hand on Kael's arm, and immediately his fear melted. He straightened, his eyes shining with courage he had not known he possessed. The Alpha King's chest tightened. He understood then that this was not magic in the ordinary sense. This was something deeper, something that touched the soul. The Omega did not bend them with force. She awakened something inside them, and for the first time, the Alpha King realized that perhaps he had never truly awakened. That night, he could not sleep. Thoughts of the Omega danced in his mind, unbidden and relentless. He remembered her calm presence, her quiet authority, and the way the pups responded to her. He recalled the moments when she had looked at him, as though seeing past his armor, past his crown, past the walls he had built around his heart. The next morning, he found her walking along the edge of the forest that bordered the palace. The sun was rising, casting golden light through the mist. The Omega paused, her eyes catching the first rays of day, and for a moment, she seemed almost ethereal, part of the forest, part of the air, part of something ancient and enduring. "You walk alone," the Alpha King said, emerging from the shadows. "Why do you wander so far from the palace?" "I am learning," she replied simply. "Learning what the world needs, and what the hearts within it seek. Even the strongest have blind spots. Even kings can be deceived by power." Her words struck him, uncomfortably true. He had spent years mastering the art of rule, the art of war, the art of fear. And yet here she was, a single soul moving with quiet certainty, and he realized how much he had missed, how much he had ignored. He stepped closer. "And what do you see, Omega?" he asked. "What is it that you see in me?" She regarded him silently for a long moment. Then, with a voice soft yet resonant, she said, "I see a heart that has never been truly opened. I see courage and fear, pride and longing. I see someone who could learn what loyalty really means, not just from those who serve him, but from those he chooses to serve." The Alpha King felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was not weakness. It was recognition, a mirror held up to his soul. And yet, he resisted. He was a king, a ruler, a man of power. To allow himself to feel, to allow himself to be moved, was dangerous. But the Omega was patient. She did not press. She simply walked beside him, speaking little, observing much, and letting him find his own path to understanding. The pups followed silently, their presence a reminder of the loyalty that had been freely given to her. Days turned into weeks. The Alpha King found himself drawn further into her world through the gardens, into the forests, even into the hidden corners of the palace where ancient statues and tapestries whispered stories of old. In each place, the Omega seemed to awaken something in him, a memory, a longing, a desire for connection he had never allowed himself to feel. One evening, a fierce wind blew across the palace. A storm approached, dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The pups, ever attentive, gathered near the Omega, their heads low as if sensing danger. She held out her hand, and they clustered around her, finding comfort in her presence. The Alpha King watched from a distance, unsettled by the depth of their bond. He realized that he had not yet faced the truth of his own heart, that his desire to protect, to command, to rule, was now challenged by the quiet, unyielding power of the Omega's presence. The storm broke in the night, rain lashing against the stone walls of the palace, lightning illuminating the forest beyond. The pups huddled close to the Omega, who remained calm, whispering words of reassurance. The Alpha King, standing in the shadows, felt both awe and fear. Her power was not in weapons, nor in magic visible to the eye. It was in the strength of her spirit, the clarity of her heart, the ability to awaken what others had long forgotten. And then, as the lightning split the sky, a scream rang out from the palace halls. One of the pups, a boy named Leor, had collapsed, trembling violently. The Alpha King rushed forward, but the Omega was already there, kneeling beside him, her hands glowing with a gentle light that seemed to seep into the boy's skin. Slowly, steadily, Leor's trembling ceased. His eyes opened, shining with life once more. The Alpha King's chest tightened. He had fought countless battles, faced armies, and conquered kingdoms, yet he felt powerless here. This woman, with her quiet strength and unwavering presence, had done what he could not. She had saved one of his own with nothing more than her soul, her attention, her care. He stepped closer, unable to resist, and spoke, his voice low and filled with wonder. "Who are you, truly?" The Omega looked up at him, her eyes calm, yet filled with a knowing depth. "I am what they needed," she said softly. "And perhaps what you will need too. But that truth is yours to discover." The Alpha King understood, in that moment, that everything had changed. The pup's loyalty, his own curiosity, the quiet stirrings in his heart. It was a challenge unlike any he had ever faced. And he knew, deep in his soul, that the Omega's arrival was only the beginning. Cliffhanger. Outside, the storm raged on, wind and rain thrashing against the palace walls. The Alpha King looked down at the Omega, kneeling among the pups, and realized that the kingdom he ruled might no longer belong solely to him. Something stronger, older, and far more powerful had come, something that could awaken hearts, test loyalty, and demand a truth he had never been ready to face. And he did not yet know if he was ready to surrender to it. The storm had passed, leaving the kingdom of Eldrath drenched in silence. The courtyard was littered with fallen leaves, glistening wet in the early sunlight. The Alpha King walked among them, his mind restless. The pups moved around the Omega, still drawn to her presence with a devotion that seemed unshakable. The Alpha King could not deny it. Her influence was extraordinary. Yet he had begun to see that her power was not only in the present but in the secrets of the past. A week had passed since Leor's collapse. Though he had recovered, a shadow lingered over the pups. Several had complained of strange dreams, nightmares filled with shadows that whispered threats in voices only they could hear. The Alpha King, who had faced countless battles and conquered armies, felt a chill at the thought. He knew instinctively that these were not ordinary dreams. The Omega noticed his concern. One evening, she approached him quietly as he walked the palace battlements, staring out at the distant forest. The wind tugged at her cloak, revealing the faint shimmer of silver threads woven through the fabric threads that caught the light as if they held some hidden power. "You are troubled," she said softly, her eyes studying his face. "The shadows you see are not new. They are old, born from the past of this kingdom, from the choices of those who came before." The Alpha King turned to her, his gaze intense. "What do you mean?" "The curse that touches the pups is tied to your ancestors," she explained. "Long ago, pride and ambition created a rift, a darkness that refused to fade. It lies in wait, feeding on fear, doubt, and the absence of trust. It is not your fault, yet it demands your courage." He felt a knot in his chest. He had never believed in curses, nor had he feared the unseen. But as he looked at her, calm and unwavering, he sensed the truth in her words. She did not speak to frighten him. She spoke to prepare him. "What must be done?" he asked, his voice low. "How can it be stopped?" "You must face it," she said simply. "Not with weapons, not with armies, but with heart and soul. You must choose whether to protect what you love, to trust what you feel, or to let fear rule." The Alpha King clenched his fists. He had never been tested in such a way. Battles could be fought with steel. But this was something entirely different. That night, under the light of a crescent moon, the Omega led him to the edge of the ancient forest. The trees were tall and black, their branches intertwined, like hands reaching toward the sky. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying voices that seemed to come from long ago. "This forest holds the remnants of the past," the Omega said, stepping lightly over the roots. "It is where the curse began, and it is where it must be faced." The Alpha King followed, his heart pounding. Each step seemed heavier than the last, as if the forest itself weighed down upon him. The pups followed silently, forming a protective circle around the Omega. Their loyalty was evident. Yet it was not obedience alone. It was something deeper, as if their souls recognized the path before them. As they ventured deeper, the shadows began to take shape. Dark forms emerged among the trees, whispers growing louder, voices accusing, pleading, mocking. The Alpha King's instinct screamed at him to fight, to strike with sword or command, but the Omega stopped him, raising a hand. "Do not fight," she whispered. "This is not a battle of strength. It is a battle of heart. Face it, understand it, and you will find the way forward." A figure stepped from the shadows, a shape dark and twisting, with eyes like burning coals. It moved with an unnatural grace, gliding closer without sound. The Alpha King felt a chill run through his veins. He could feel the darkness reaching for him, probing his thoughts, his fears, his pride. "Step forward," the Omega said softly, placing her hand on the Alpha King's arm. "You do not face this alone." He took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the weight of his ancestors pressing on his shoulders. The shadow hissed, circling him like a predator, whispering doubts. "You are weak. You are unworthy. They will betray you. You will fail." The Alpha King felt the fear rising, but he caught her gaze. The Omega's eyes were calm, unwavering, filled with trust and something deeper belief in him. And in that moment, he realized that his strength was not in steel, nor in command, nor even in his fearsome reputation. His strength was here, in choice, in courage, in protecting what mattered most. "I am the Alpha King," he said, his voice firm. "I will not let fear control me. I will protect them. I will trust what is true." The shadow recoiled, its form wavering, unsure. The pups moved closer, their presence lending him strength. The Omega stepped forward, her hands glowing with a soft light. the source of her quiet power. Together, their combined courage and trust formed a shield, pushing the darkness back. "You see?" the Omega said, her voice steady. "The shadows only have power when you give it to them. Stand together, and nothing can break you." The Alpha King's heart pounded. He had never felt so alive, so connected. He looked at the Omega, and in that gaze, he saw not only guidance, but something that transcended loyalty, something that reached into his very soul. For hours they faced the darkness, pushing it back with patience, understanding, and courage. The forest seemed alive around them, responding to their unity. Leaves shimmered with silver light. The whispers softened, and the shadow forms began to dissolve, retreating into the depths from which they had come. Finally, the darkness was gone. The forest was still, silent except for the gentle rustling of leaves. The Alpha King felt exhaustion settle into his bones, yet it was accompanied by a strange exhilaration, a sense of victory that was deeper than any battlefield triumph he had ever known. He turned to the Omega, his eyes searching hers. How did you know?" he asked. "How did you know how to face it?" She smiled faintly. "I did not. I simply guided. The strength was always yours. You had only to see it, to trust it, to act. And in that choice, you found what was hidden within you." The pups gathered around, their faces shining with relief and admiration. They looked at the Omega, and then at the Alpha King. A silent acknowledgement passing between them. The bond between them was no longer merely loyalty or obedience, it was unity, forged through trial and trust. The Alpha King felt a shift within himself. For the first time, he understood what the Omega had been teaching all along. Strength was not measured by fear or power alone. True strength was in courage, in connection, and in the willingness to trust and protect those whose hearts had chosen to follow. Yet, even in victory, a new unease stirred. The forest had revealed a piece of the past, but there were more shadows yet to uncover, secrets tied to his lineage, truths that had been buried for generations. The Omega looked toward the horizon, her gaze distant, as if sensing the threads of fate moving beyond their sight. The Alpha King felt the pull of that unseen future, the weight of what remained unknown. He knew that this was only the beginning, that trials would come again, and that his heart would be tested further. But he also knew that he would not face them alone, not while the Omega and the pups stood by his side. He reached for her hand, and she did not pull away. In that simple gesture, a promise was made, silent yet unbreakable, that whatever shadows arose, they would face them together. Cliffhanger. As the first rays of dawn touched the forest, a distant roar echoed through the mountains, shaking the ground beneath them. The pups stiffened, the Omega's eyes narrowed, and the Alpha King felt a chill that went beyond fear. Something ancient had awakened, something far greater than the shadows they had faced, and he realized that the next trial would test not only his strength but the bond of all their hearts. The roar had not been a dream. It had shaken the mountains and echoed through the valleys, a warning of the darkness that lingered beyond the edges of Eldrath. The Alpha King stood at the edge of the palace courtyard, the Omega at his side, and the pups forming a circle around them. The wind carried the scent of rain and earth, and in that moment, everything felt alive. The trees, the stones, the very air. "This is it," the Omega whispered, her voice steady. "The force that stirs is older than the kingdom, older than the mountains themselves. It has come to test what we have built, to challenge what we hold dear." The Alpha King's chest tightened. He had faced armies, storms, and shadows born of his ancestors' sins. But this was different. The force was alive, intelligent, and hungry. And yet, he did not feel fear. He felt determination, the kind that comes from knowing that what you fight for is worth everything. "Then we face it together," he said, his voice firm. "Whatever comes, we stand as one." The Omega's eyes glimmered. "Together," she echoed. They moved toward the forest, where the roar had come from, the pups following silently, yet with purpose. The trees grew darker, older, their branches twisting like the fingers of ancient guardians. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the shadows deepened. And then it emerged. The force revealed itself as a towering shadow, larger than any creature the Alpha King had ever seen. Its form shifted and writhed, impossible to define. Yet eyes glowed like embers, burning with a hunger for despair. Its voice was like the wind itself, whispering doubt and fear. You are weak. You cannot protect them. You are unworthy. The Alpha King stepped forward, placing himself between the shadow and the Omega. He raised his hand, feeling the warmth of the pups and the calm certainty of the Omega flowing into him. We are not weak, he said. We are not afraid. We stand together, and that is stronger than any darkness you can bring. The shadow recoiled, its form flickering. It surged forward, a wave of cold and power, and the wind howled around them. The pups bristled, growling softly, their loyalty unshaken, their courage renewed. The Omega placed her hand on the Alpha King's shoulder, her light glowing softly, touching the hearts of everyone nearby. You do not fight alone, she whispered. Feel our strength, our trust, our hearts. Let it guide you. Let it guide you. Let it guide you. The Alpha King felt something awaken within him, a power not from sword or shield, but from connection, from trust, from the bond of souls that had been forged over days of trials. He realized then that this was the lesson the Omega had been teaching him all along, that true strength was in unity, in courage shared, in hearts open enough to face fear without faltering. He stepped forward, raising his voice so that it carried over the shadows. I am the Alpha King of Eldrath. I am not alone, and those I protect are my strength. The shadow shrieked, a sound like mountains cracking, but the Alpha King did not falter. The pups surged forward, barking, growling, their energy fierce and loyal. The Omega's light expanded, weaving through them, a luminous thread, binding their courage, their faith, their hearts together. The darkness roared, and the ground shook. Yet slowly, impossibly, it began to recede. The Alpha King felt the warmth of the Omega's hand, the trust of the pups, and the knowledge that fear had no hold over those who chose to stand together. Then, with a final, ear-splitting cry, the shadow dissolved into the air, scattering like mist before the morning sun. Silence fell, thick and profound. The trees were still, the wind softened, and for a moment, the kingdom seemed to hold its breath. The Alpha King sank to his knees, exhausted, but not defeated. He looked at the Omega, whose calm presence had guided them through the darkness. She smiled softly, her eyes reflecting relief and pride, yet a quiet acknowledgement of the battles still to come. You see now, she said gently, the strength you thought was yours alone was always shared. Courage grows when hearts are united, and loyalty cannot be forced, it must be awakened. The pups gathered closer, their faces shining with triumph and devotion. They looked to the Alpha King, and then to the Omega, understanding, perhaps better than anyone, the bond that had been forged through trial, trust, and courage. The Alpha King rose slowly, feeling a change deep within him. He had faced darkness, yes, but he had also faced his own heart. The pride, the fear, the solitude that had defined him for so long, and he realized that what he had found was far greater than victory. It was connection, understanding, and love. He stepped closer to the Omega, reaching for her hand. She did not hesitate, and their fingers intertwined, a simple yet profound acknowledgement of what had been built. A bond not born of fear, not of obligation, but of choice and recognition. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice carrying gratitude deeper than any words could hold. For teaching me what I could not see, for showing me what strength truly is. The Omega shook her head slightly, her eyes gentle. It was always inside you. I only helped you to see it. And perhaps, you will help others to see it too. They stood together, watching the sunrise over Eldrath. The kingdom, once heavy with fear and rigid order, now seemed alive with possibility. The mountains gleamed in the golden light. The forests whispered songs of renewal, and the air carried the promise of days yet to come. The Alpha King looked at the pups, who had fought not with weapons, but with hearts open and spirits brave. They had chosen the Omega, yes, but they had also chosen to stand together. And in that choice, they had strengthened him as well. He felt a warmth of pride, not the pride of conquest, but the pride of a leader who had learned the meaning of loyalty, love, and trust. The Omega leaned slightly toward him, her voice a soft murmur. They have chosen me, yes, but your heart, too, has been chosen. That is why you are here, why you stand strong, why this kingdom endures. The Alpha King felt a swell of emotion he could not name. It was not love alone, nor trust alone, nor courage alone. It was all of them intertwined. A force greater than any darkness, stronger than fear, and brighter than any sword or crown. And in that quiet moment, he understood fully what had drawn the pups, the warriors, and even himself to her. She awakened what was hidden, revealed what was true, and reminded all that loyalty, courage, and love were not given. They were discovered, nurtured, and shared. The Omega looked toward the horizon, her expression calm yet full of certainty. The Alpha King followed her gaze, and in the distance, the mountains and forests seemed to hum with life, with possibility, with the echoes of challenges overcome. He turned to her, his voice low, reverent. Then we face what comes next. Together? Together, she replied, her hand tightening slightly in his. The pups circled around them, their eyes bright with hope and devotion. They had followed her willingly, but now they followed the Alpha King as well, recognizing that the bond they shared was no longer a hierarchy of command, but a unity of hearts and souls. For the first time, the Alpha King felt the full weight and beauty of leadership, not as a ruler feared, but as one who inspires, protects, and stands together with those whose hearts have chosen to trust. The kingdom of Eldrath had changed. The shadows of the past had been faced and overcome. The darkness that had threatened them had been met with courage, loyalty, and the awakening of hearts long asleep. And at the center of it all stood the Omega. Quiet, yet powerful. Her presence, a light that could not be dimmed. The Alpha King looked down at her, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Words were unnecessary. They had faced the impossible, conquered the shadows, and discovered the truth of strength, love, and loyalty. And in that moment, he knew that the bond forged in trial had rewritten not only the fate of the kingdom, but the hearts of all who had been touched by it. Cliffhanger, closing hook. As the first golden rays of morning bathed the courtyard, the Omega looked toward the horizon and whispered, "Our souls chose each other long before we ever met." The Alpha King knelt beside her, knowing that the kingdom, the pups, and even his own heart would never be the same. And somewhere, far beyond the mountains and forests, a distant echo of the shadows lingered, a reminder that challenges may return. But for now, they stood united, unshakable, and ready for whatever destiny might bring.